Welcome to episode 17 of the Shamrock Green Room, your favorite podcast highlighting everything about Scotus Central Catholic and Columbus Catholic schools. Each episode, we discuss what it's like to be a Shamrock. Whether that is a current student, a teacher, an alum, or supporter, we want to hear your stories on why this is such a special place in education. I'm your host, Jon Brezenski, 1998 graduate, former boys head soccer coach, assistant football coach, and current assistant coach for the girls soccer program. Today, I'm joined by Janet Tooley. Janet is a longtime teacher in the PE department, track coach, and volleyball coach, and recently retired at the end of the school year. It was great to get her in here. It took a little bit of work to get her in here, but we finally got it done. And looking forward to covering her career and reminiscing on her time at Scotus and obviously what's in store for the future. So, Janet, thanks for coming in today.
You're welcome. Most people would be surprised that it's you had a hard time getting me to come and talk because I'm definitely noted for my gift of gab. Yeah. But yeah, doing it on a microphone is a little bit different.
It is. But although, it did take a little bit of work to finally get you coming, a couple months worth, but we got her done. So this will be fun today.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of dive right in here. I mean, Obviously a lot of people know who you are, but let's just give us a little background before we get on your time talking about your career and everything. Just give us a little background about yourself, like where you came from, where you grew up.
Okay, I grew up in Elmwood, Nebraska, small town, population of 550 between Lincoln and Omaha. A lot of people confuse it with Elwood.
Out by
Lexington, but it's Elmwood, and we were the Blue and White Pirates, Class D back then when there were only four divisions for high school sports. We were Class D. I graduated with 16 in my class,
wow.
eight girls and 8 boys.
Okay.
That worked out great. We had one of the first foreign exchange students ever in our class, Odi Annika Niskala from Sweden, and I still actually stay in touch with her.
Really?
So 8 girls, 8 guys. Small town Nebraska. I grew up just 2 blocks away from the high school, still had gravel roads on our streets, and being only 2 blocks away, I did not get a car until midway through my senior year because I walked to school every day.
Sure.
I walked to practice, walked home in the dark after games. So just, small town country living. My mom is still living in Elmwood. My dad passed away. He'll be gone now 3 years ago. And I've got one older sister. Deb is 2 years older than myself.
Where does she live at?
She lives actually down with her husband on the Harlan County Dam. They've relocated.
Oh, yeah.
They farmed around the Elmwood area. And her first husband is deceased. And she and her second husband live down. They have relocated to the Harlan County Dam.
Okay.
My parents, our family owned a fishing cabin up in Minnesota for 50 years, exact.
Sold it. Minnesota?
Yes, in Minnesota. Sold it right before COVID. Mom and Dad were getting to the point where it was a little bit tough getting back and forth. And so we grew up, even though we were, in the middle of cornfields growing up, spent a lot of time in Minnesota whenever we could get up there, and those were our family vacations. So we're kind of water rats.
What's the connection to Minnesota? Are you just found it? Or?
Yeah, my dad was a longtime fisherman and actually built his first boat, a wooden boat. And we would go up to the cabin back then, had a station wagon. My sister and I they'd put like sleeping bags in the back of the station wagon. Of course, in those days, you never had seat belts for your kids, so we're still alive today, all the thousands of miles. We drove back and forth to Minnesota in the back of the station wagon.
So you're like the Griswolds before
the
Griswolds?
Yep, exactly. Playing with our Barbies, entertaining ourselves on the 9-year drive.
Yeah.
And, so grew up around the water, and Deb's still a water rat, and Tim and I ended up out living on a lake.
Sure.
So that's definitely part of my growing up history was walking beans, walking the cornfields, just like I said, didn't live on a farm, but grew up with the farm lifestyle in Elmwood.
Wow. Well, and what year did you graduate from there then?
Graduated in 1977.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then actually went straight to UNL. I look back now and I actually tell students this, I was really motivated to get out fast. And I actually, since Elmwood was only 40 minutes from campus, that very first year out of high school, I actually drove in every day and actually took 2 classes, which was pretty...
In the summertime?
Yeah, which was pretty unusual to do back then.
Yeah.
And my first instructor was a guy by the name of Dr. Sharif, and it was a phonetics class because I was majoring in PE and my second endorsement is English. And I was taking English phonetics from a non-English speaking professor, Dr. Sharif or Sharifi, And I thought, oh my golly, if this is what college is like, I am never going to survive. But I made it through that first class, and then I took summer school every year except one. So I did graduate in 4 years, but and competed.
Yeah.
And I've always told kids that, and they do slow it down now. But I that's one regret I have, that maybe I wouldn't have slowed things down and had a few
just
more.
kind of enjoyed the summer.
Right.
Yeah.
And just, you know.
And now you see, it's kind of funny that you talk about that, because now you see some kids graduating in a semester.
Yeah.
Like I got some of my club soccer girls that graduated semester. You see that with club volleyball. I mean, you see it with all these club sports now, where these universities want these kids to get in early. And, you know, I can see that point, but I also, you know, you kind of
I'm seeing
miss
these
out on
kids
that
giving up
semester.
that junior prom, and
prom,
you know, and I tell these
stuff.
kids, you know, or even some of the kids, and I understand finances is a big deal, you know, but even kids, well, I need to work, and it's like, you know, but you only get to do high school once, you know, but hindsight's 50-50 for all of us, and we know that, and it worked out well for me, you know, but so I did rip through college pretty fast.
Wow. And so your major in college was?
Physical education, 7 through 12, and then back then you actually could get a coaching endorsement. So I actually have what's considered a coaching endorsement.
I could get that too still.
Yeah, where you have to have your specific classes, sports psychology, first aid, all of those things, and then I have an English endorsement also.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you competed in track, but you also played some volleyball.
Played volleyball. So Pat Sullivan, my senior year, had talked to my high school coach and was interested in me. And as it turned out then, she resigned and Terry Pettit came on. So with Terry being new and that change happening a little bit late, it turned in, then we had to go through tryouts. And so I thought, well, you know, let's give it a shot. So went down to UNL that week, and pretty entertaining, because that was Terry's first year. His assistant was Russ Rose.
That's so ironic.
Anybody who doesn't know anything about volleyball, so Russ Rose of Penn State fame, was his assistant. And so, made it through the cut. I don't know if there was about 60 of us trying out, and every day you just go to the Coliseum, because it was back in the Coliseum at that time.
Yeah.
Would go back into the Coliseum and just see if your name was still on the board. And if it was, you went back the next day.
So each day they put up a new list.
Yep, each day they put up a new list. And each day things got a little tougher. Midweek we had to run a timed mile. You know, there's a lot of fitness tests involved. So fortunately, being a track athlete, that kind of played into my favor. The one thing that I was fearful about was they did know that I was on a track scholarship, and I was afraid that might cut me, just because you don't do that very often. Even in that day, more girls could do it then than what they do now, but even then that was kind of a tough combo. But anyway, so so I made the cut, and you know, just that one semester in that volleyball gym. I mean, I learned so much. I'm 5'5", was 5'5" then, I'm 5'5" now. No libero back then, and had a nice vertical jump. So in high school, I played outside, D volleyball. I could play 5'5" outside. But they retrained me as a setter. And if I remember correctly, we carried about 18 to 20, if I remember right.
Setters?
No, 18 to 20 total in the program.
Oh, okay.
Where now they don't carry quite that many.
I was like, that's a lot of
but
setters.
No. But there is actually a JV and a varsity team. So I was actually a gal, Lori Melcher from Beatrice was the varsity setter at the time, and then I was her backup. So I set the JV squad, and we all practiced together, but we did have separate schedules. So we would play junior colleges and stuff like that. But
just around the area and stuff,
we would
travel
still,
a little bit too.
Yeah, we'd still travel, and I always say how old I'm getting, because that was the Big 8.
Yeah.
So think about how many divisions
I
the
know.
Huskers have switched. Every time they had a new division, I always tell my husband I'm getting older and
crazy.
older. And, you know, we would take vans. You know, we'd drive all night long. You know, it was not the luxury that you see in the UNL athletics now, but it was the good old grind. End of that year then, went into volleyball, went straight into training for winter, you know, indoor track. You know, so that's a whole new deal, you know, for this little Class D athlete who grew up running I ran on a cinder gravel track. Yeah, and it really wasn't even a track. It was just it happened to be almost a quarter of a mile around our football field.
Okay.
And the last 50 meters of it had an uphill grade. So
really?
as I trained for the 400, that last 50 meters was always an uphill grade, which ended up being really advantageous on race days.
A little burst.
But anyway, so going in, and we were one of the first teams also to compete on the Bob Devaney indoor track.
When you were on the track
Yeah,
team?
yeah, we were one of the first teams on the indoor, the new that was new back then in 77.
Okay, yeah, right before
we
you
were
got
the
there.
first. Yeah, we were the first ones,
Wow.
and so that was a whole new experience. And then going on into outdoor, that year I did get to run in the national meet down in Tennessee on the 4x4. Basically, I ran the 4x4, the 4, and the 6 indoor. And then messed around a little bit with the 4x8 as an alternate outdoors. And then my junior year, they also moved me up and I ran some 400-meter hurdles. So,
Okay.
But pretty much a middle distance there. End of that spring, went in and kind of talked to Russ a little bit, kind of about what things looked like. And, it was a load and
that's
really
a lot.
regretfully felt like I needed to stick with the track because of the finances. Looking back now, I always wonder how my life would have changed. Like you said, 50-50. Russ ended up being there just those 2 years, and then he went to Penn State.
And then he was at Penn State ever since.
And you know how that kind of goes.
Yeah.
A lot of times the setter follows the coach, and I'm just kind of wondering, would have that happened if I would have stayed that sophomore year? Would have I actually ended up
at Penn
in
State.
Penn State? You just
Isn't those
those
what ifs are
conversations,
always,
just that decision at that point. But
such a monumental decision,
It
but
is.
then you're kind of like, yeah, what if this would have happened, or what if that would have happened?
And everybody will get a kick out of this. I was the smallest one on the team, and Russ's nickname for me was Squirt. That was my nickname on the volleyball team, was Squirt. And Pete and I went down and listened to him talk at one of the coaches' conventions there in Nebraska down at the clinic. And I didn't know if he'd remember me or not, so walked up to him and I said, "Well, hi, Coach." And he goes, "Well, hi, Squirt."
Really?
So those are the
Awesome.
those are the kind of relationships that you really appreciate.
Yeah.
You as a coach with former athletes coming back to you, but even at that level, back in that day, it was just awesome.
Yeah.
That's
so. I guess when I don't know if they ever really mentioned that, like when Nebraska and Penn State would play each other. I don't know if they'd really bring that up too much.
Yeah, not a lot. And I really don't know if Terry and Russ were that good of friends. Their coaching styles were completely different.
Sure.
Russ was get down and get dirty, and we had what we called a pit drill, and you'd be in the middle of the circle, and Russ would just hit balls and hit balls and hit balls until you literally collapsed. Really? Now, in this day and age, you can't do that kind of stuff.
So it's like the football bull in the ring
type
thing?
Kind of, yeah. And, Terry was much more, he's as if anybody follows his Facebook page and his stuff now, definitely a psychologist. And that was a whole new ball of wax, too, was that mental training.
Yeah.
And that was really new back then. But let's face it, some of the ideas that Terry had as far as free volleyball admission, as people were leaving Husker Stadium and walking by the Coliseum to get people into that volleyball, into that volleyball
Attendance.
Coliseum. It was just amazing, what he did.
His vision, kind of a visionary.
His visionary was just amazing, yeah.
Well, I don't know where I learned this about you, so we'll kind of digress a little bit with a little special talent that you had in high school or when you were growing up. And I don't know where I found this out at. But
I might have told this to the kids.
You got to tell me about this fire baton twirling expertise that you had.
I'm not really an expert, okay. But so one of my babysitters back in Elmwood when I was growing up, I just, you're a little girl and, you're adoring these high school babysitters that you have, and she twirled the baton. So she started giving me baton lessons, but she also twirled the fire baton. So this was kind of something I just did on the side. It wasn't like something I practiced an hour every day. It was just kind of a sidekick. So anyway, she had this fire baton, and she goes, "Do you want to learn the fire baton?" And I said, "Well, sure." And literally the fire baton, I don't even know if they do it anymore, but literally the fire baton back in that day was a metal baton, and then on each end, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like cloth all scrunched together. Okay,
like
so
kerosene on it
right,
or something?
yeah, so it wouldn't fall apart. You literally soaked in kerosene, both ends, and you lit it on fire.
Wow.
And that's what it was. And
Your
then
babysitter taught you this?
Yeah. And then, by then I was junior high, senior high.
Oh, okay.
I was just doing the regular baton in the old days,
okay.
yeah. But then she goes, "Well, do you want to learn the fire baton?" So, like I said, you can do pretty simple tricks with the fire baton and make it look pretty impressive.
But still, it's fire.
And it's still fire. The only accident I ever had was a good old-fashioned cut-off jeans back in that day, the fringes. I did start one pair of shorts on fire and had a little burn on my leg, but that was the worst thing that happened. So that was, yeah. pretty short-lived career.
Well, that's
yeah.
a good little. That's good. You probably busted out maybe some family events or something.
Yeah,
Did you ever bust it out like a teacher's thing here?
No, no. It's the baton's gone.
That's buried.
Yeah, the baton's gone. I did do a couple football game performances.
Really?
That was the height of my famous baton twirling career.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, let's jump into the family stuff here. So, where did you and Tim meet?
Tim and I met. This is a funny story. Tim and I also met down at UNL. It was my sophomore year, his junior year, the very early in that year, and he was a member of the Delta Tau Del frat. I was not a sorority girl with all the other stuff I had going on. I was just a dorm rat. And Cindy Tatum on the track team. She's for older people. Cindy was one of a top sprinter in the state of Nebraska in her days in track and field out at North Platte. So she was on the track team with me, and a best friend of hers, Stan McCammon from North Platte, who was a Delt.
Okay, a frat brother.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Stan talked to Cindy and said, let's get a co-ed flag football team going. Because in flag football, the guys cannot pull the girls' flags. So he goes,
sure.
we'll be smart enough just to give the girls the ball, and nobody else is going to be able to catch you girls.
Yeah.
And so that's how Tim and I met. And Carol Frost, our head track coach, did not know we were doing that. So I'm guilty of sneaking a few things behind a coach's back, like just maybe some of my athletes did with me also. But so that's how we met.
Was your track coach in Nebraska?
Carol Frost was my track coach.
Wow.
And Larry Frost was one of the assistants back then. And as we were traveling, Stephen Scott Frost, you know, everybody, all of the different things that Scott's gone through, but they would have been toddlers back then. So a lot of times in those van trips, because
you would have only
2 or 3.
They
They were toddlers, and our nicknames for them were actually Zip and Zap.
Really?
And it was really fun when Scott first got the position and was traveling through the high schools. I got to visit with him when he came out to Scotus, and he remembered being Zip and Zap, and so that was
funny.
So Carol, was
she your track coach the entire time at
Yes,
Nebraska?
and then quite a few years thereafter until Pepin took over.
Okay.
Yeah, so Carol was there.
And then they went to Wood River after that?
No,
or they kind of jumped around a little bit.
I don't know if, did they start in Wood River and then, I don't know. But then went back to.
Because the boys went to Wood River High School.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you and Tim start dating and
we started dating, would have been in 78.
Okay, and then you guys got married in 81, you said?
Got married in 81. We dated just that year, and we were engaged at the end of the year. So we really had only dated about 9 months. And, of course, I wanted to stay at Nebraska. And then that next year, we were just on campus together 1 year. Then he went down to the Med Center to start his pharmacy doctorate. So we had 2 years of engagement, not living in the same city.
Gotcha.
And then I graduated in May, and we got married in June. That first summer, since he was still in school, quote, I was the income. So we lived on hot dogs and beans, and I worked at Hummel Park Day Camp that first summer. Waiting.
So you guys living in Omaha?
Yeah,
then?
waiting. We had an apartment in Omaha, and then I had drawn a 50-mile radius around Omaha, thinking I could commute 50 miles to a teaching job, and had 2 offers, Bennington and Gretna, which were both my 1 and 2 choices. Bennington would have been an English position and head volleyball. And the thing that was good about that position was the gal who had been there for years, and she was retiring. So they were going to rewrite the curriculum. So I would have been hired to rewrite curriculum over the summer and would have had a paid job. And Gretna's offer was really my first choice, and that was 7 through 12 PE with head volleyball. And that's the one I fortunately ended up getting. Okay. So that was a really ideal.
It's crazy how those 2 towns are growing so much.
Yeah.
I mean, Gretna's
and I
continues to grow in Bennington.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both 2 of the fastest growing cities.
Yeah, and I still have friends, out there at Gretna. Kirk Elledge and I team taught very similarly to what Gary and I did here at Scotus. There were kind of 2 main, and it was really an ideal position there. Brand new building. I believe that is now their middle school.
Yes, it is.
Right, but that was brand new back then. And then they were revamping their PE curriculum. So kind of came in, whatever you need, you got, give us some new ideas. So that was pretty.
So you got to kind of help create that while you were there.
So that was a pretty cool opportunity for, fresh out of school and all these new ideas. And so it was.
Was that a C1 school then at the time? Or
it was
that
B.
It was
B. And then Scotus was still B back then also. Yep. Yeah. We actually played Scotus once. I can't even remember what tournament it was, Raymond Central or something like that. We did play Scotus once, and we lost.
Mm-hmm. So when you were the head coach for Gretna, you played Scotus one time?
Once, yeah.
Huh.
And, but back then we only played like 15 games. I think my first season, and Gretna had not been very good. So I came in with no pressure. Let's try and change this thing around. We were 7-9 our first season, and I was just devastated. I had never had a losing season, and it's like, oh my God. And they thought we'd won the Olympics, just getting close to 500. Every year we got closer, and then jumping ahead then in 85, I know, we had visited about what brought us to Columbus, so going ahead and jumping ahead. In 85, in January that year, Jake was born.
Okay.
And Dick had called Tim, the gentleman who'd been working in the pharmacy with him for years, wanted to retire. So Dick asked if he'd be willing to stick around until May. If Tim and I then wanted to come back, I'd be able to finish the school year.
Yep.
So then that's what brought us back. But I knew that next year that team
was going to be good.
Was the one that was going to do it.
Yeah.
And actually one of my friends from UNL got the job, and they went to state that next year.
So
I missed out on that.
They went to state?
So I missed out on that. So
and that's
Scotus
also the year that Scotus won the state title.
Yes, right.
Class B.
So I was in the stands watching that.
Oh, really? Did they play each other that year?
No, I don't think they did. I don't remember that they did. But because Courtney would have been on that team.
Oh, sure.
Courtney Tooley.
Yeah.
So here's this mixed emotions, because it's like I'm looking at Tim going,
that could be me down there.
That could be me down there.
Yeah.
So anyway, but like I said, it's just the timing of everything. But you felt like really felt like I was a part of it.
Sure.
And helped to get that program up and going.
Yeah. Was Tim still in school then, or was he working?
He had 1 year. He just had at Gretna, just that first year I was at Gretna, he was finished up then. So there were 3 years that he worked in the Omaha-Lincoln area.
Oh, gotcha.
Before we moved back.
Before you moved. Okay.
Yeah, he had drove to Lincoln for one position with the family pharmacy, and then he was actually working in a pharmacy in Omaha. And he liked the family pharmacy, and that was kind of his intent when he graduated. Was to come back.
Sure.
So that was kind of in the cards.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of talk about the kids. We'll kind of circle back around.
Okay.
Here. So let's talk about the three kids. And you mentioned Jake. He's an 03 grad. Jamie's a 06 grad, and then Toby's in 15. So let's just kind of talk about each three of those.
Well, so, all three of the kids were three-sport athletes. All had different levels of success in their different sports, but, all appreciated their education here at Scotus. Like all kids, had the daily complaints, but the daily good things, too. I always laughed. Everybody said, what's it like to have your kids in the building when you're teaching? I always felt bad for Toby because he was the only one that was here when I was actually starting the health curriculum. So he had to go through the 8th grade sex ed health curriculum with his mother teaching that. And I promised him I'd put him in the back row of the class.
Sure.
But I wasn't teaching health yet when the two older kids were here. But anyway, it's like I only saw my kids during the day if they forgot money. If they showed up in my classroom, then they'd come all the way to this end of the building, right?
Yeah.
Get money. But, as far as, teaching and coaching, I'll be honest, with the volleyball, I missed out on a lot of Jake and Toby's football stuff. I really did. Jamie, got to see a lot of her stuff, got to coach both Jake and Toby in track, and then Jake just had a terrible Achilles. So he ended up playing soccer then his senior year because he kept blowing his Achilles, couldn't finish track season.
Ironically, blew it out in alumni soccer.
In soccer, yeah. Gee, later as older age, yep. And I have to tell you, he came back, I think it was last year, thinking, I think I'm going to go again. And he had his cleats, and he started to put them on, and he said, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
He said, I got smart again, but he was really tempted.
We had two Achilles that year. He was one of them, and then Jody Eichmeyer was the other one.
Yeah.
They weren't a few minutes apart, maybe.
And the thing with Jake is he was still doing his psychiatry internship at the Med Center. And he happened to be in one of his high-risk internships, so they actually had to shift his
stuff around.
Because in case you're in with a patient that happens to get overly emotional or combative, you wouldn't be able to get out of the room. So he now is a adolescent psychiatrist at Boys Town. And Kelsey has a writing and English degree from UNO, but she's a stay-at-home mom. And their oldest daughter, Mara, is 9, so she'll be in 4th grade. And Louisa is kindergarten, so she'll be in 1st grade. We call them Mo and Louie. Sounds like our pet labs, but they're Mo and Louie.
Where do they go to school at then?
And they go to school at Holy Cross.
Okay.
And Jake and Kelsey actually just live right across the street from Mercy. So
Oh,
literally on the corner, and then Holy Cross just so
it's kind of midtownish then.
Yeah, yeah, and they love that kind of quirky old style houses. You know, they love the area. Jamie and Jon then. So Jamie graduated from UNO. She played volleyball down there, and assumed that she would do her pharmacy school at the Med Center. Actually, kind of had applied out at Regis in Denver. And actually got accepted. And she chose Regis. They were just starting a new program that was really non-lecture oriented. It was like all hands-on pharmaceuticals. So she was really into not having to sit in lecture classes and got accepted into that program. So she moved out to Denver and happened to be visiting with some friends at UNO, and a group said, hey, we have a good buddy from Hartington, CC, who's an engineer out at Denver. Will introduce you, if you need help moving out, whatnot, Of course, we moved out with the truck and the trailer, real fancy bringing her stuff out there. So she and Jon actually met up that very first weekend after we left, when she was in Denver, and started dating and ended up married.
Wow.
Yep, ended up married. And then they were back. They actually then moved back for 5 years.
It was nice to have her back.
It was. And worked at the drugstore, kind of wanted to give it a go, but then just realized what is all involved.
Yeah.
And she goes, and plus they are outdoor, and they were used to Denver and the mountains and skiing
different
and
adjustment.
all the river, and just had that calling back. Jon actually has an aunt and uncle that live in Billings, and they ended up in Billings, Montana. So,
and that's where they still live.
And that's where they still live. Yeah, they've been out there about 5 years now. Jamie had a great career here, obviously, here at Scotus. Athletically, she was very blessed, and had a great experience here in all three of her sports with multiple state championships. But they're out in Denver. Jon is an engineer, and Jamie actually still does do some filling of pharmaceutical stuff, but she's also in the administration part of it. Her company just merged with another company, so they have now covered like 500-mile radius of multiple pharmacies, and she's in some of the administration and staffing of that. Their oldest daughter, Kaylin, is just 5 years older than Mara, 5 days older than Mara. So our two granddaughters are just 5 days apart. And then Connor, he is 6 months older than Louisa, so he just turned 7. So when the four kids
buddies.
And they're just at that point where they've got their iPads now, so they can converse back and forth. So so it is really fun when they get back. And then good old Toby. Tobes just turned 28. He was kind of our late addition to the family.
Yeah.
And
that's going to be a fun story.
Yeah, he was our late addition to the family. And he's 28. He has a business degree. He has worked in banking. He's worked in landscaping, maybe one or two other things. And he has currently just started bartending. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Where at?
He's working, I think it's called Circa.
Okay.
It's an Italian place. He actually started out at one of the casinos, but he's actually at this Italian place now. And Toby always seemed to have jobs where he was always working in kind of small spaces with everyone older than him. So we're kind of actually looking forward to this stage as far as getting to work with maybe some kids his own age. And
especially in the bar scene.
Yeah. He and Eduardo Lopez, they're best buddies. They roomed together for quite a few years. And Ed's now engaged. So Tobes is living on his own, and he's okay with that. But so we're kind of anxious to see
where that leads.
Where that bartending gig leads. Yeah.
Well, tell a story of Toby, because that was my senior year of high school, and I remember that.
Yes.
And there's just such a lot of interesting pieces to that, obviously.
So with Toby, Tim and I had trouble getting our kids here healthy. We lost 3 little girls. And I don't know, in my heart, I always wanted 3 kiddos. I just had the one sister, but I always wanted 3 kiddos. And what even got this whole adoption thing going in our mind was we were on a McKesson National Pharmaceutical trip, and kind of knew pharmacists from Iowa and Nebraska. When we'd go on this national trip, we'd all kind of hang out together. We were visiting with one of our family friends from Iowa who had just adopted through Holt International.
Through this
whole
agency,
this international agency.
Okay.
So we got to talking, and we got back, and they sent us all the stuff, and it's like, let's do this. This was meant to be that we would meet that couple, and we were kind of debating, And
So was that in 97?
It was 96 actually,
Okay, so
because
the year
then he
before.
came home in 97.
Yep.
It took us almost a full year to get through the entire process.
Okay.
And we had some glitches along the way, but long story short, so we, on Holy Friday, we find out we had this baby coming home. And then you still have to wait for all the visas and all these things. And usually that only takes about 3 months to happen, and ours took 9 months. There were some issues in the Omaha office, which we don't have time to go into.
Sure.
So we were waiting and waiting. We're in a teacher's meeting in the fall, and Kathy Cruz comes in and says, Janet, Tim's on the phone for you. And I thought, okay, I didn't think anything about the adoption.
Sure.
I thought, okay, is there an
Something else.
emergency?
Yeah.
Because he just isn't like that to call me at school in a meeting. And he goes, we have a baby coming home this Friday. Yes, and this was like a Tuesday meeting, and it happened to be district volleyball. And it's
Of
like
97,
yes,
so that's
and it's
the
like
GICC
Friday.
Scotus game.
That's the district finals Friday night, and we have to pick Toby up in Des Moines. They fly the kids over. You can actually go to South Korea and pick the kids up yourself, but that would have taken even longer because we would have had to have gotten passports and visas.
Sure.
So it was quickest for us for Toby to have an escort back to the States. And so I went in and told John that. We're scratching our heads. I call my mom, and she goes, Janet, you have to go get your kid.
Yes.
She goes, don't you even
Yes.
think. I says, Mom, I'm not.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we actually tried to see. I went down to the ticket office to see if we could intercept him in San Francisco, because they were landing in San Francisco, Denver, and Des Moines. So I thought, can I get there 2 days early and get him in San Francisco, and he and I fly back, and same thing in Denver, but we could not make the connecting flights. So it's like, okay, I'm going to miss this game.
Yeah.
Tim Michelson offered to fly us with his jet, and Jean and Lisa Witt went with us. That night when the bus was ready to pull out, I got on the bus, talked to the girls and everything, and so the bus is leaving. We're heading over to the local airport here.
So this is the same night.
This is the same night. We're in the air as the game is
being
happening.
played.
As the game's happening. And we had sent Jamie and Jake with some of their friends, and Rich Jablonski and Al Nabalski had us on the phone. So we were getting play-by-play. We had to shut the phones off when we were landing. And then we got back into the airport, and as we're going through the airport, we won match point. And we're just, all these people are looking at us. We're just going nuts, And back then it was 2 out of 3. We won the match 15-13 in the third set, and one of GICC's best players. We won the match on a set call, Jenny Kropp, on a set call. Back then you could not set first serve in high school ball, but you could club. And she was a club player.
Yeah.
So she set the ball, blew the whistle. We won the match.
Yeah.
So we got Toby, flew back. I don't know, Rich or Al, one of them, brought Jake and Jamie out to the airport so they could meet Toby out there. And then we all went back to the American Legion Club. They had a big sign, welcome home, Toby.
Awesome.
Celebrated until about 4, this poor kiddo. Then I was here up at school with practice
ready.
all week. So the managers had Toby all around the school. I never knew where the kid was. I don't think he even knew who his real mother was for the first 7 days. Tim, of course, pacing at the top of the stadium during the, with this new 9-month-old.
Yep.
And we always laughed that Toby spelled USAGYM because he really
lived in the
did. He
gym.
started from the gym and he grew up in the gym. Yeah.
What a story, though.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
I remember that because, like I said, that was my senior year of high school. when that
November
happened.
7th was the day. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And it's crazy because little Korean babies, their dark black hair just sticks up, and they actually call it scare hair. So here's this little kid with his hair sticking up all over, just kind of looking around like, what have I gotten myself into?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
I can just remember when you left during that time
Yes,
frame.
yeah.
I just remember that.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yep.
Well, let's circle back around then again. So you end up coming in 87, and then you get involved in coaching volleyball, and obviously, the history of the volleyball program, you were a part of that. But just kind of talk just really briefly, and then we'll kind of move into track and stuff. But talk briefly how that all came about? Because you started in the junior high. You go from
Right.
coaching high schools, you're a high school head coach, and you come to Scotus and you're in the junior high role.
And I'll be honest, I mean, everybody knows me. I think Jon and I have, literally side-to-side personalities as far as how we do things. And pretty tough to, kind of have this program for 4 years and then to come in and go back to the 8th grade level. And probably not a lot of places I could have done that. I don't know if you blame that on ego or if you blame that just on personality, And, Jon was very receptive, to me. And I did help, like, with the varsity when I could, I started traveling with the varsity that, of course, none of the junior high coaches had done prior to that. So I went to all the varsity games, was in their gym when I could be. And I did that for 2 years. Mary Beaver then took a position over at middle school. And so I moved up to the freshman year for 3 years, I think, or so. I don't remember. And Marla Mueller was Jon's assistant at that time. We actually ran against each other in track in high school, and then we played that year of volleyball together down at UNL. She marries Con Mueller from Schuyler. I marry Tim. Those two guys know each other. She was actually the head coach at Central City for a couple years, and then wanted out of that, came with Jon, and then and how I started the position here actually was I took Barb Maliski's. When Barb wanted to go part-time, she was PE science, and she chose science, and I took her PE position. So my first year I was
opened up in
right.
That.
So my first year was 7/8 time with PE, and then the next year I went full-time, and like you said, the rest is kind of history.
And then obviously you coach for a long time. It's kind of just you're assistant for a long time, and then you step away for a couple of years.
Yeah. And, Jon and I really had some heart-to-heart conversations. I said, if you're willing to go one more year, I'll take the head. But the reason I didn't want to do it that year was it was Toby's senior year, and he was running cross country. He'd played football just his freshman year, and he went cross country with his size. And I just felt like I'd missed out on so much of his stuff. I just didn't want to jump in his senior year to something new. And Jon was, and I know where he's at now. And you're not, you stepped away from a program too. You just know you love what you're doing, but yet there's still other things calling your name.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was at with my family. And I still had the head track. So, I was still involved with the athletics. But anyway, so then, so was out of there for the 3 years. And then when Joe was getting married and resigned, Jeff, I actually avoided Jeff for about a week. Wouldn't even let him find me because I thought I just had gotten used to not doing it.
Yeah.
And I knew.
Kind of nice to have the free time.
Right. I knew the time that it takes, and I hate to say it, the pressure of Scotus volleyball. I mean, it's just a different sort of pressure when you've had established a tradition like we had. And I think people are appreciating it more now. But just parity across the board in sports has changed since it was back then. We were really ahead of the game. We really were back in that day. And, people have caught up, and there's a lot more parity. And I was recognizing that, and that pressure of, okay, I know I can't go back and repeat what we did back in the 90s and early 2000s. And I don't think any program will ever do that again, to be honest. You might have a Scut or some of those, but a
different player makeup.
Right. And I should say, a lot of
population base.
Exactly. A lot of one sport specialized athletes, which we don't want to do here at Scotus. We don't want to go that route.
Really.
We can't. If we all want to be good, we can't, So that was my hesitancy, but I agreed to do that. I think Jeff promised me a cleaning lady. I should call him out on that because I don't think I ever got that cleaning lady out of the deal.
To clean your house?
Yeah, to clean my house. I mean, he was willing to give me, it's like, Janet, we just,
all your kids were gone.
I'll give you that cleaning lady.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how I got back in. And the problem was I had no assistant. And that was the other really big deal because Danielle wasn't coming back. Julie wanted to stay at the freshman level. So now here I'm this head coach with no assistant. So Melanie Mimick agreed to do it. She had only played volleyball through her sophomore, junior year at Aquinas, had never coached. And then Wade Colder stepped in also just because he'd played men's ball. So, it was an interesting
transition.
First year, Yeah.
Well, you get to state in 2018, and then obviously, then last year, this season was fantastic season. And across the board for all sports this year was just fantastic.
And we just won the cup.
The girls scored, 257 points or whatever it was?
And, we were talking about that this spring.
That's a remarkable score.
We were talking about that this spring going, we got to have it this year. Just, between journalism and one act and speech, and a lot of people forget about those fine arts that go into that cup deal.
And speech team had a great
season. And credit.
And journalism.
Yeah, that's I said, journalism, speech, the one act, all of those things, So, and I mean, that's just a credit to our school. That's one thing I'll always tell kids. If someone comes and talks to me about, I'm just not sure I want to go out next year. And it's like, especially if it's a junior or senior, and they kind of know where they're at in their time commitment. But it's like, that's the thing that's so great about Scotus. If you give up, I shouldn't say give up. If you determine that one thing isn't your pathway, there's so many other great things you can do here in your extracurriculars and still be really good.
Yes.
And still have a great competitive, successful, fun role here, experience here at Scotus. Yeah.
And this season obviously was a memorable season. But let's talk about, because then you decided to step away. But let's talk about the kind of the transition or the process because
and I'm going to give credit to Jon this season, and I've actually talked to the seniors from last year because those two repeat sweeps against Lakeview and David City in the district last year. I don't know how many times this summer and this season we talked about that. Credit to those seniors that year because, the season before, we were really up and down. And we had seniors playing, but they really weren't senior experience. It was really their first varsity experience, And so credit to those kids for believing in the process. This process took 2 years. It wasn't just this season, and just a shout out to them. And, we talked about that, so much throughout the season.
And early in the year, you guys won a lot of 5-set matches.
And that
which were different than the year before.
First one against Kearney Catholic, we're still looking at what should have been match point maybe for Kearney Catholic winning it. And they actually called the ball out, and Mallory was sure that ball was in, which would have been a win for them.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that one point, how that just kind of catapulted, everything where we had that belief, and it's crazy. Even in that match against Ogallala, even after we'd lost set 2, this sounds crazy. I did not think we were going to lose that match, even with all the pressure there. I mentioned, and, credit to all of the girls on the court. I think they all had that fortitude, but they all had their unique attitude when things were down.
Each person brought something different to the table.
Each person brought something different, and I think you could see Kayla in the back row, obviously, ending up as All-State C1 libero, what she brought. And that was so crucial, too, with her development the year before in the 6-2 actually setting out of the back row. As a libero, she could take that second ball and set it, and she was used to that leadership opportunity as a junior. That was huge. Mia, everybody loves Mia. Nobody can get angry with Mia as your setter, as your setter. And, she'd come in. It's like, okay, if somebody else can't get a kill, then somebody give me the darn ball and I'll get a kill. This is ridiculous. How many times Mia used that term? This is ridiculous, you guys. And it was just, really, or Mallory, okay, do you want me to set from the back row, coach? Do we set Mia? They were all just, Larkin being willing to hit all different sorts of shots. Adriana really came on this year. Just a huge, So, but just that belief in one another. And they thought it was fun. It's like, you guys, this is nuts. These reverse sweeps should not be fun. But we win them, coach. We win them. So that was pretty cool.
They're just confident.
Yeah.
And, they kind of. And I think that you kind of saw that in each sport then as the season came through.
I do think it kind of helped everybody out. Yeah.
Well, you kind of, and I asked you this, so kind of take us through the process. Well, the transition of because like when I was coaching, it was, I stepped away for a couple of years to do the college thing, and then I came back in 15 and 16 and volunteered help. And it was kind of in that fall of 16 where I'm standing out at the football field, and I'm just kind of like, what am I doing out here? Yeah. And
other priorities.
I've done that for a long time, and I was away from, spent a lot of time with these guys and loved them. But at the same time, I had 4 girls at home, and that started to really tug at me. And then even during our 3 championships, I was just spent a lot of time with those kids. Yeah. And you almost, I don't say I had guilt.
I don't think parents realize that sometimes, how much time coaches really put in with their kids
Yes.
and miss out on our own kids.
Exactly.
And I hope in this podcast that parents really, really do appreciate that.
Yeah.
That our hearts and soul, actually, we're almost giving more to their kids than we are our own kids.
Yeah, and so like during that run, there was nights where I just didn't sleep a lot because you were just kind of thinking about all these different things. And I just remember it was a really vivid moment, and when I was standing out the football field, and I came home that night, and I told her, this was in the fall of 16, I was like, I'm done. I'll be done after this year. And the first year, when I told the kids in 17 in the spring that, and then you have your last game and so forth, but that first year, I just stayed away from everything. You kind of miss it, but then you just get right into it, and you don't. Yeah. And now, and people are like, are you going to ever get back into it? I was like, no, not going to get back into it.
Yeah.
So take us through your process of when this started.
It really started at the beginning of last summer, and just the time frame. And part of that was my dad's death. Dad will be gone now 3 years in July. Like I said, Mom's health is still good, still lives in our family home. But the week of his funeral was the week we were at Creighton team camp. Dad really passed away fairly suddenly, really digressed from a Monday, and he was gone Friday night. Put him in hospice Thursday evening, and they thought he had probably maybe 4 days left, and he was gone in 24 hours. So that was a blessing for him, but a shock to us.
Sure.
And Monday and Tuesday was Creighton team camp. And the funeral was
the week of or the week after?
After.
So he passes
Dad
away on a
passes
Friday.
away on Friday.
And you got team camp coming
Team
up.
camp Monday, Tuesday. And we were trying to get the funeral in on Wednesday because there was another funeral, and otherwise we would have had to have waited until Friday. So, and my assistants weren't, Alex was my only assistant who was a teacher, but everybody else off staff, so they don't necessarily have the summer free. So trying to figure out that Creighton team camp, and I did go down. I was in Elmwood Saturday and went home Sunday, and then I did go down with the girls on Monday. Kim Dreesen this last year really stepped in and really helped out and grew a lot as a coach herself from the junior high level. But anyway, so she was a real godsend. So she and Alex couldn't go on Monday, if I remember right. So Kim went on Monday, and then they both covered for me on Tuesday.
Sure.
So I was there Monday just through the camp, and then drove back to Elmwood. And then I was in Elmwood on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
But that's when it hit me. It's like, I've been doing this an awful long time. And then to tell my mom, I've got open gym 2 days a week. I've got 3 more camps yet, another camp yet to go. And you're just kind of thinking that. So that's was the beginning of it. And I was really intentional the whole year, realizing that this might be my last, but yet I wasn't ready to say this is the last. And even with the last point at the state tournament, in that darn state tournament, I truly believe we could have beat anybody
It's all
down
about
there
the draw.
except Minden and Wahoo.
Yeah.
They were the worst 2 draws for us.
Yeah.
And, I walked off the court. So then you're thinking, okay, you get to state. What's next year? You get that taste again, and you're tempted. And that's why I really waited. I needed to let those emotions play out. But it took me a long time to get the end of the season book done this year. It was just
finality.
Yeah, and just it was work. It was becoming more work rather than, okay, let's get this done and start planning for next year. Yeah. And that's when I really realized. And then as we were talking, Mr. Van Cure and I were talking about changing in the curriculum, changing the health and PE curriculum, and what my teaching schedule would have looked like next year. This coming year, I would have been teaching a lot more of the junior high level. Because of the change in the scheduling with the health. I still would have had the health. But just with the revamping of the program, I thought, it's just a good time.
Good time to just step out, not have to redo it all again.
And all the assistants were willing to come back with whoever came in as the head. They were all willing to come back because I talked to them about it. So it just, But like you said, I would actually be honest. I'd love to come back and just coach, or I'd love to come back and just teach. But both of those things were changing enough that it's like, okay, this is the time
Just
to let it
away.
go. Yeah.
And there's always kind of that, like you said, there's like, is this the time or not? But I think you're gonna.
It's even weird today, like walking into the building and knowing I really no longer work here. Yeah.
But I think you're gonna find an inner peace there too.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to get to that point.
Yeah.
Like, it took me about a year or two to get there.
And you're there too. And to be fortunate enough to have had the success that we've had here at Scotus, and the memories and the friendships, to leave while you still love it.
Yeah, and it was hard when I stepped away from the boys, and then, like I said, I took the year off, and then obviously kind of over the next couple of years, sprinkled it. Now I just kind of volunteer full time, but there's days where I miss, like Allie, Allie ran track, so there's days I didn't go to soccer practice because Allie's running track. So it's you got a little bit of freedom, and you're gonna enjoy that. Go to Omaha and look at watch the grandkids.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're gonna enjoy that.
I plan on a few trips out to Billings. Tim's still not retired yet, so I'm hoping that he can at least get a little relief pharmacist going and can get away a little bit more. But I'm not afraid to do things by myself either.
Yeah,
so,
well, that'll be fun, though.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of freedom.
Just girlfriends I haven't connected, like I said, some of these teammates that we're talking about from, college track and volleyball. And some of those girls coached also that are now done. So, getting together and reconnecting those friendships,
Well, we talked a lot about volleyball, but obviously you're a successful track coach. You won a state title in 2009.
Yeah.
You had some pretty good tracksters on that group. Yeah. So just kind of touch on that 2009 season with that state title.
Yeah, the 2009 season at track is such a different ball of wax than your team sports. As I was, thinking back to that. So, Amber Ewers, was a stud her junior year, and, we did well that year. And then when Sammy Spinner comes out her senior year,
kind of a game changer, really.
Yeah. And, she had talked to me about track a couple years prior, and we'd kind of just talked about why she wanted to change sports and whether it was for the right reasons or not, And her senior year, she just said, Coach, I just really want to try this. I really want to try this. Like, okay, Sammy. And at the beginning of that season, so I thought, we kind of got a 1-2 punch here, but you're still Class B,
Which, that's crazy
tough.
To me. Like, it's going through that this year with Allie, like, it's crazy that a school our size is playing Class B. The disparity of enrollments.
Like even this year, when Blair and Bennington come into our district, they've got more kids in their senior class than we do in our high school. Yeah, and I mean that even makes
especially Bennington.
That even makes such a huge difference,
depth-wise.
even getting down there.
Exactly.
And the argument always was state track has to stay 4 days, but now with COVID, or has to stay 2 days. Excuse me, because we ran A through D. But now with COVID, they run A, B 2 days, and they run C, D 2 days. Yeah. So there's really no argument any longer that track could not at least go 5 divisions.
Well, I was going to say you could almost still
you
could go. Yeah, I mean you could look at A and B, and then C is the biggest class, and split C up, and then state D. Yeah,
and
I
that's
totally
what I'm
agree.
saying. There's things that could be done to make that better. But anyway, that's not the way it was back then. No. Also, we only scored out to 6, where now they score out to 8.
Yep.
So if you had a couple studs, you had a shot at winning it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, So anyway, first meet, Amber comes up lame with a stress fracture. And it's like, well, okay, and we spend the whole season actually training her in the pool. Mm-hmm. That's a story in and of itself because she's repeat state champion in the 400 going forward again her senior year. Mm-hmm. I literally wrote up her pool workouts, heart rate and time-wise, to exactly what we would have been doing on the track. And she went over to the aquatic center, and she did those workouts on her own. So credit to her.
Yeah.
And she was going to be cleared to run the week before districts. So she trained the whole season that way. So now we got Sammy, who's never been out for track, and she's jumping. So we have to be really careful because you don't know what her legs got or if she's going to break down. So we had to train her really careful. Get to the state meet, they're both able to run. We're sitting Friday night with everybody in the finals that needed to be, but of course now you got to run your finals. Mm-hmm. It looks good, but you haven't scored those points, and everybody knows anything can happen in that 400 down, and that's where all of our points were. Day goes great. Amber ends up winning that 400. And our strategy in the race was it might have been a gal from Gretna, to be honest. It was a younger gal from Gretna who'd kind of shown up that year as a stud. And she had kind of beaten everybody solidly. So I told Amber, I said, I think our race strategy has to be you have to go sprint. You got to sprint.
In the 400.
In the 400. You got to sprint and see if you get enough lead on her because she's not used to being in that situation. And then we just got to cross our fingers. And that was how she ran her race. And
just went out.
Yep, she was out, and she was out, and she was out, and held it on by about a stride.
At the
end,
the girl kind of
down the straightaway, the girl was catching her, but that was our strategy, and Amber ran it, wins that, so we get those 400 points. Now they're both in the blocks for the 200, and coaches can't be on the track, so I'm at the fence just talking to him, and I'm saying, you're never supposed to tell a kid what not to do. Like don't jump because then you put that negative in their brain.
Yeah.
So I thought all I told them was clean start. You don't have to be the first out of the blocks. Clean start, and we can win this sucker. And so I'm watching. It almost brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on that hill
Yeah.
kind of by myself there
Yeah.
at the start of the 200 where I can see
So
the
you're
finish.
underneath the, yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the start of
Yep.
the 200 because I
Yes.
want to see the start.
Correct.
You know, I'm
Correct.
not. I can
And
see
they're
the
running away
finish.
from you.
Right, and they're running
from you.
away from
Yeah.
me. You know, we both cross the line, we finish, and and probably the Scotus coaches knew it, but we're the only ones in the stadium that know that we just
Locked it up.
won the state championship. You
Yeah.
know, it's just a set. You know, it's just like. Just kind of standing there looking like this is just crazy,
Yeah.
you know. And so so that
Did they
was.
finish 1-2 in that race? Or do you remember?
I don't even remember.
They scored enough points
yeah,
to win.
they scored
That's all
enough
they
points to
needed.
win. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, being at state track this year was fun. It was fun.
It's a unique.
It
It's a
is.
unique event.
Yeah,
you know?
but I do like your point of, and I hope, this is going to take a proposal from the coaches to
Yeah.
change it, which
Yeah.
I know there's kind of some talk of it, so we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see where it goes.
And like I said, now that they've got the 4-day meet, that was always the clincher. We can't go more than 2.
Yeah.
And now that's not an issue.
But you could almost go 6 classes and go 3-day meet.
Exactly. You almost
And just
could.
go-
And, you know, people
but move all the finals
and,
to
you know, and
Saturday.
everybody, that used to be kind of really the premium event because it brought everybody, the entire state of Nebraska, all schools, all sizes. And they just didn't want to let go of that. But COVID forced that. And now a lot of people, they still miss that atmosphere, but it's just not as crowded. It's easier on the kids warming up. It's a safer environment on the infield. It's more enjoyable for the spectators.
Yeah, and I mean, they always draw good crowds, but yeah, you can
So it
imagine
turned
if they
out
were
to be a
all
good
there
deal.
at the same time.
Oh,
like,
it was-
you wouldn't get a
yeah.
spot.
No,
anyway.
it was
like, we had to
crazy.
park 5 blocks away to
Exactly.
walk there.
You know, back in the day, those big trees on the hills weren't there.
Yeah.
I mean, those hills were full of people sitting on those hills. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, and obviously, Sammy, you know, Amber goes to USD and has a good career
Yeah.
there, and Sammy obviously
Goes on.
becomes one of the greatest
Yeah.
track collegians of all time.
yeah, really. You know, and it was really bad timing. I don't remember all of
UNO.
that. I don't remember all, but when UNO then switched to Division I, that kept her from
Competing in the national
competing in
tournament.
the national
Finals.
championship. And I know they really tried to put a hardship case in for
They
that.
did. They went through all different
I remember-
appeals and
yeah.
just went up to the final
Couldn't-
judging, and
yeah.
they still couldn't get it,
And
which is unfortunate.
I don't understand
She was
that
one of the top
either.
10 athletes in the country.
Yeah, and just because you go to this school and you have this paperwork happening at that time,
Yeah.
you know,
Silly.
yeah,
Silly.
it was, yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, so now you're kind of in your retirement here, and just kind of reflection. I mean, and we talk, you're part of the PE. They're gonna revamp that curriculum, so you don't have to worry about
Yeah,
that, which is
yeah,
kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess as you kind of do some reflection, I guess walking away or just kind of stepping away, what kind of sticks out in your mind and from a reflection standpoint?
You know, just this past year, I got a letter from one of my alumni from the mid-'90s, and she goes, Coach Tooley, I don't know if you remember me, gave me your name and everything, and I did remember. And she goes, I always remember your 10-minute PE runs. Everybody hated your 10-minute runs in PE, but we started every day with a 10-minute run. And she goes, I just want to let you know I was the slowest. I was overweight. I was the slowest, but yet it was always good enough for you. As long as I tried, it was always a good enough effort. You never compared me to anyone else. And she says, I just want to let you know now, I'm in my early 50s. I just finished my first 10K with my kids. I've been running since that day. Those are the things.
Impact.
Those are the things,
Mm-hmm.
when you hear back, from those sorts of students.
Sure.
Even just the funny stuff. I had a 7th grader this year and in health class, and he's selling pieces of gum, okay? And he's selling his pieces of gum for 50 cents.
Like a stick of gum?
Yes, well, or like a little piece of
Yeah.
gum, And it's like, okay, I want a piece of gum. And he goes, okay, well, 50 cents. And it's like, I am ready to start class. He goes, but Mrs. Tooley, I got to get my gum sold. And I'm looking at his classmates going, you guys are paying him 50 cents per piece of gum. He's going, shh, don't, I'm up $7.50.
Oh, my gosh.
But I mean, it's like, okay, that's fine. You can have your gum business, but class starts when the bell rings.
Yeah.
I'm not holding up class. Just those sorts of stories.
Yeah.
Or the year, Jamie's year, we were at team camp, and they should not have won the state championship that year with the group we had coming back. It just and Lincoln Lutheran should have ran away with it, and that is who we ended up upsetting and beating in the state finals that year, who'd beat us the year before.
Yes.
And the girls had told Jon at team camp, if we win the state tournament, we get to dye your hair. And I don't know if Jon shared that story or not. So
No, but I remember
won.
that. I remember that.
So we won. And of course, they thought they were going to go pink or yellow. And Jon goes, hey, I never said what color. You can dye my hair brown. So they got together at our house and dyed Jon's hair brown. So the seniors the next year, this is Liz Hadlin and that group, well, what do we get to do if we win the state tournament? And Jon kind of looks at me and goes, that's a real stretch. We pulled off the miracle last year. All the coaches will get tattoos.
Yeah.
And we're going, now, wait a minute, where did this come in? So that tournament, when we were in the final match that year, we had all put a Shamrock black marker on our legs.
Oh, really?
And so when we were in the locker room before the match started, we all pulled up our slacks and said, okay, girls, we have to win this for these to become permanent. And they just went nuts.
Yeah.
And
win it.
so we won that. So we end up with we all go get tattoos. I think Blaser is the only one that didn't get one. But, Jane, Gary, Jon, we all went and got tattoos. Just
little things.
Just some of those things. Some of the bus trips. I told you originally, I really couldn't come up with stories. And then they kind of start flowing. We never had a tornado at the state track meet. But we did come home dodging tornadoes from a couple of state track meets in the spring, where we actually had to pull the vans off
from the hail. Yep,
from the hail, and hide out behind some sheds there at Rogers. Had the storm chasers blowing past us at Elkhorn on the way home. Some of the trips to the state volleyball tournament when blizzards hit, we had that happen twice, where we were in parent-teacher conferences, and Gary came down and said, "Hey, call the girls." Jon goes, well, you got to walk through. He goes, no, you don't. You get the girls here, you get on the bus, and you get to Lincoln. Because if you can't get there tomorrow, you don't play. So some of those, some of those trips. The great, which you can laugh at, the intentions were good, but the big, great old charter bus.
Yeah.
And we're on our way to that state tournament there in 2018, and we're the first team to take it on the long road. And one of the girls is saying, Coach, like this window, it's like shaking. And it's like, it's fine. It's the outside window. And a couple miles later, the whole window blows out. Fortunately, it was just the outside window, not the inside window. So no one was hurt. It wasn't.
That was a big white bus.
Yeah. I mean, you think of all the stories that have gone on. Cheryl Rambor, I don't know. Cheryl Rambor was such a prankster with the faculty. Gary Pitts and I had it back and forth a few times. Our Jon and I, our motto in the volleyball gym was always "Don't get even, get ahead." But yeah, just those. Dan Mahoney, when he called me in and said, "I feel like I need to be done, but the only way I'll retire is if you take it." Just having that sort of trust.
Yeah.
For track.
Yep.
Just those special moments. Yeah.
And I think you're going to find out, and you deal with this already, but like when the kids come back to you and like, Coach Tooley, do you remember, like the boys do this to me all the time at alumni soccer. They do it all the time. Coach, do you remember this story? And they'll talk about a story like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't remember it, but like their perspective of what they remember. And so you kind of get that point of view from them. That's always kind of fun too.
And that's what I always tell the girls, even at team camps and stuff. I said, I hate to say it, we are here trying to be successful and we are here trying to win. But when it's all said and done, these are the stories you're going to remember.
Exactly.
They really are.
Exactly.
That's what. And I think our society is struggling and losing sight of that. I don't know how you bring that back. It's just the change in society.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're gonna get close to wrapping up here. So your, plans. I guess you've kind of said you've left. I've read a couple things that you said. I read your Champions book, or your Champions article. So what lies ahead? I guess what lies ahead for you.
I've asked everyone to send prayers out for me. I've told the good Lord, you guys all know me well enough. Once in a while a swear word might stick out. But I've always just told the good Lord, open up the next door and shove my darn butt right through it, as to where I'm supposed to be going. Everyone has said when you retire, you should have a plan. And I've always been a very planned person, and I have none, which makes me a tad nervous. But obviously with Tim's intentions at the drugstore for a while longer, that's definitely then thus keeping us in Columbus. I'll be honest, we have had some talk long range. Dick and Joan are our only family, and the drugstore are our connections to Columbus now. I don't anticipate our kids moving back. They're very happy where they're at. We actually have, discussed the possibility, would we like Montana someday? But once again, that's all just in the discussions. Nothing, we love where we're at now. And Tim did offer me a short-term job. He had one of his drivers had to have surgery, and he offered me a short-term delivery job.
Oh, there you go. Is he going to pay you?
If I do it, he's going to pay me.
Yeah.
He keeps hinting that Earl May does have a sign, help wanted,
there
to
you
go. I love plants. He goes, you could go water the plants.
Yeah.
But like I told him, I said, I know I cannot stay home 7 days a week. Something's going to happen. I just don't know what it is yet.
I was talking with a coach last night during one of my sessions I was having, and I talked to a friend of mine, and I do feel like this, and especially with the last year with some things that we've gone through. It's like, God has a plan.
Yeah.
And things work out the way they're supposed to work out. And that's kind of what I've given myself up to this year is like, things work out the way they're supposed to.
And I know you've heard it. Most parents have heard it. But as a parent, you're only as happy as your saddest child.
Correct.
And, even with my kids, being 40, 37, and 28 now, it's really no different than when they were 8, 17, and 19.
Mm-hmm.
They're still your kids, and your heart goes out to them.
They do.
And just life's hard, but yet life's good.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people make it through without faith.
Exactly.
100%. I don't know how
100%.
people make it through without faith, and that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and you just think. You just think about all these different things that happen in your life. Like, where could you be? Like, our lives could be so different if things go different ways in certain situations.
And, to be honest,
right?
We kind of talked about Penn State. What have I ended up there? But to be really honest, back in my day in the late 70s, we didn't even have any counseling.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any, go job shadow or anything. I just knew I wanted to do something with sports.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. This kid coming from a town of 500, 16 in her class. That's all I knew was I loved sports and I loved fitness. And head to UNL. And once I got to UNL, the class that really, and I still talk to my health classes about this, was anatomy. We got to work in the anatomy lab, in the cadaver lab, which they don't get to do any longer. Mm-hmm. But I told the kids actually seeing the interior of a human body, a smoker versus a non-smoker, a drinker versus a non-drinker, obesity versus fitness. I said it spoke 10,000 lessons to me in just that anatomy lab. And then on the track team, we got to be involved in a lot of the exercise research, exercise physiology lab stuff. And we actually got to do the VO2 max uptake and all of those different things. They used us as the guinea pigs. And once I got into that, I really loved exercise physiology. Probably had we not moved to Columbus, I really wanted to teach and coach for a while, but I really wanted to go back and get my master's and actually work at the collegiate level in exercise physiology. So look at that stretch versus where, the move to Columbus took me. But that was initially, 2 years into college, that really was initially kind of where I thought I would head. Yeah. So I always apologize to the health kids because we do an exercise physiology unit in there. I says, this is to pacify me because I love it so much, and I hope it'll turn you on also as far as future fitness goals and you know.
I took your wellness class twice, and the second time I took it was for no credit.
Yeah.
And you're like, you don't get credit for that. I know, but I just like the class.
And that was the one that was the 6 in the morning.
Yeah, 6 in the morning. We went to the Y. That was one of my favorite classes of all time.
Yeah, 0 period. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of find. This is kind of our final question that I always talk with everybody about. How would you describe Scotus Central Catholic in one word?
I would say blessed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say blessed is it's blessed to have had the tradition that it has. It's blessed to have the potential future that it has, and to have supporters to help get it there, because there's a lot of Catholic education that doesn't have that.
Yeah.
So blessed for the tradition, blessed for the future potential.
Yeah. That's a great answer. That's the first time anybody said that.
Yeah.
So well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks,
This
Jon.
was fun.
This was fun.
This was fun. I just love talking with everybody that comes in here. So everybody's story is different. I mean, I think some people learned some things about you today.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we wish you all the best. I mean, obviously,
Thanks.
Shamrock Nation wishes you all the best in your retirement,
Thanks.
and thank you for your years of service.
Yep.
So,
it's been a special place.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So. Well, if you're interested in hearing more Shamrock Green Room podcast, subscribe to us and rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure to follow us on our social media channels, Scotus Central Catholic on Facebook, X and YouTube, and Columbus Catholic Schools on Instagram. If you have some ideas for some guests on the podcast, please email me at coachbrez@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us in the Shamrock Green Room.